Greetings, brothers. Welcome back to part 2 of the Masterclass. If you missed last week's episode, I highly advise you go and check it out now because we're going to be jumping in where we left off last week. I'll link last week's episode up above. Alright, let's get into it, guys. So last week we talked over a couple of games and also my list for the RTT. Today's agenda, we're going to score the list out of 50, which I like to do for most lists, try and just give it an overall feel of how balanced the list it could be. I'm going to talk over the tournament final, I'm going to break down some of the plays from the game, and then as always, I'm going to talk about what I learned, because even if you lose or you win, and in this case I did lose, I still think I learned a few things about 40k that I probably didn't know. Hopefully I can bring them to the next tournament, maybe one of these days we'll finally get a win. Alright, let's jump into scoring my list. So this list is obviously a battalion. It has the 3 troop choices. They're all OBSEC, and we also are running Rights of War. Really, the only way we could get more in terms of objective holding is if we have Visage of Death, but CP costs, CP are rare, CP are needed, so we just ran with Rights of War. But I was pretty happy with OBSEC. We're going to say 9.5 out of 10. I have terrible anti-infantry horde in this list. I have very little shooting since the Whirlwind nerf. The Whirlwind did very little damage before. It does literally nothing now. So this list is heavily reliant on melee combat. If the enemy have chaff units, I'm going to struggle to chew through them. All I've got is like some Unjealous Bolters from the Sangre Guard. My experience with them typically is they don't kill that much. So 6 out of 10. I rated myself very low for my horde effectiveness. Against vehicles and monsters, though, I'm going to rate myself very highly. We got 15 3 or more damage weapons in here, including loads of Thunder Hammers. We're backed up by 2 squads of Sangre Guard. I got quite a few Infernal Pistols. I've got those Eradicators as well. So yeah, anti-monster infantry didn't really feel like I had too many problems. I suppose you could even bundle in Unleash Rage in that category to get even more damage out of my jump units. Mobility wise, so literally the whole list is mobile. The things that aren't mobile are my Assault Intercessors and the Eradicators. My Assault Intercessors I've been placed in reserve, which kind of makes them mobile anyway, so it's just the Eradicators. So I'm just going to say this is a 9.5 in terms of mobility. Along with the Wrath of Baal and the pre-game move, mobility here is no issue whatsoever. And then specialization, I've said we've given it 9 out of 10. I lack protection against mortal wounds, and I knew that going into this tournament, and I mentioned it before in part 1 that it was kind of my Achilles heel. I did play against Tyranids that spit out a shitload of mortal wounds, and we did get the victory there, so I guess smart play and, playing around my strengths actually can make up for that, and I usually say when you are trying to specialize your list, there's always going to be something that you're not good against. You can't pick to be good against everything, so pick what you're comfortable with, and I think there's certainly some value in that. So I totaled this as 43.5 out of 50, and it's not the highest list score that we've had. We've had lists on this channel that score up to 46. I think we maybe even have a tournament winning list that scored 46.5. But I've been experimenting around with Blood Angels for a couple of editions now, and I've been enjoying the way that I play them. I play them quite differently to other people. If you aren't familiar with the way I play them, it's kind of a more slow approach, with turn 1 and 2 being less impactful and the end game turns trying to be the big impacts. So that's how I like to play, and I guess my lists revolve around this. Any final thoughts, I suppose, on the list? And my thoughts were I really battled with this list. And some of the changes that I'm considering after the new chapter approved has dropped, which Nephilim did just drop a couple of weeks ago now. I'm thinking I'm going to add some more Sangre Guard and lose my Vanguard Veterans. I think Vanguard Veterans with Storm Shields are okay still, but I think for the most part, Sangre Guard are going to save just as reliably, and they're typically going to be able to do more damage. I think I'm going to add some more firepower to the list. I don't think it's going to be Eradicators. I think some of it might be Eliminators with those Las Fusils that went down in points. I'm probably going to drop my Terminators, but we did just get an FAQ that potentially gives Terminators like a 1-inch easier charge from Deep Strike because if the opponent's in obscuring terrain, engagement range is increased to 2 inches. This would actually help a great deal when you're dropping in some sort of deep strike unit like Terminators. I have a feeling they might FAQ this rule. There's some people have already mentioned that there's problems with it. So let's see what happens. But before the change to deep strike, I was really thinking my Terminators are maybe going to go, and we're going to try and round out the list with more Sanguinary Guard, lose the Terminators, add some more fire support, and yeah, of course, there'll be a new list coming soon. I think I'm going to be playing a game live on the channel next week, so that will be my new list. And I'm thinking, as much as I enjoyed playing this fully melee Blood Angel style list, I'm thinking that there's a lot of things out there that counter Blood Angels, and in the final table I got countered a bit, I feel like. So I think I'm going to go back to my balanced approach. I've kind of sworn by the balanced approach for a long time. Armor of Contempt changed everything for me. I think it changed a lot of things for a lot of Blood Angels players. We maybe dive fully into like Sanguinary Guard and melee units just being the absolute tip of the iceberg. But I think Armor of Contempt helped a lot of other units as well. So stick around in the coming weeks, and we'll definitely have more content around what I would class as a balanced list. If you are getting some value out of today's video, remember, just hit that like button. It is really appreciated, and it helps the channel out, and more people will find and watch this video. So welcome to the top table, and this was the only picture that I took of the entire game, so I'm going to have to break down some things for you guys. So this map was tear down their icons, and I went for Nakwand, behind enemy lines, and Oath, and the Space Wolf player, and congrats to him again for winning this tournament. He went for Grind, Stranglehold, and Oath. And I think that Stranglehold would have actually helped me a lot here. I could have scored a lot more points than Oath, but obviously with Oath you never know really whether you're going first or not. And behind enemy lines normally feels like a really safe choice for Blood Angels. However, I guess I looked at his army, and he had a bunch of Woven and a bunch of Vanguard veterans and characters with jump packs and stuff with the drop pod, so I really expected him to be much more aggressive than he was. This can sometimes backfire, I guess. So the deployment zones on tear down their icons are something like this. This would have been my deployment zone, and over here would be his deployment zone. So really, I had expected, you know, his jump units and stuff to basically like maybe move into here, move up to here, leave me a lot of space behind. In reality, that really didn't happen. I started the game with like a squad of Sanguinary Guard here, and cursors in here just touching this objective. And cursors, you can see them here in my whirlwind touching this objective. Then I had a bunch of stuff in here as well. Unfortunately, the cover in the middle of the map was kind of terrible. We get 2 vents, which are -1 to hit through, and a tiny little box that you really couldn't hide any number of units behind at all. So this was going to really actually hurt me, because he's got a couple of Redemptors. And Redemptors, I mean, there's great firing arcs here. There's like literally nothing blocking them. So I can move to this terrain piece, this terrain piece, and this terrain piece. And I have to try and figure out how I'm going to close the distance between him using these pieces of terrain. And I obviously went first, so what I did was I actually formed on Fury like my Death Company up into this area. He had a couple of Redemptors here that I really wanted to take out the Redemptors, but he had Woven and Blood Claws and stuff in front of them, so I ended up just having to kill them. It did mean that, like, if you look at the primary scoring, he actually was really struggling behind me on primaries for the entire game. And like I said, if I'd taken Stranglehold, I could have had another 10 victory points here. Going first actually was a big disadvantage. It meant at the end of every turn, he was going to basically score the 2 points for being in the middle of the Oath, because there's very little I can hide here. Remember as well, Wolves get like a 6-inch heroic intervention, so I can't even just sort of hide things on here. He's always going to be able to get in and kill me like that. The drop pod being placed so defensively kind of hurt me as well. It's a huge footprint. It's blocking a huge amount of potential deep strike area. Behind here, all he's got is like 1 squad of Blood Claws. So, but I couldn't really get to them. There wasn't much room in his deployment zone at all. This really hurt me on behind enemy lines. I guess he realised that I had very little fire support, so if he managed to drop down like his strong base of fire here and just cover the whole section of the board in the middle, then because of the way that the terrain was, and you know, there isn't really any. This is very light in the center of the board, and this made it very, very difficult for me in this game. I think I could have made some better plays. I definitely got caught in that, like, his chief librarian, I ran up to basically make him the closest target and shoot him in the face with an infernal pistol, thinking like he's a librarian. Typically they don't have invulnerable saves. Well, of course he has Armor of Rust, which is fight last if you get into combat, and it gives him a 4-up invulnerable save, and of course he saved it. So there was a few, I wouldn't say they're gotchas, but I didn't know Space Wolves well enough. I haven't played Space Wolves for probably 2 years. I also failed in dealing with the Wolven. I had like a giant whiff into a group of Wolven here, where like the math said I should have killed like 3 or 4 Wolven. What actually happened was we killed one of them. And I guess sometimes that's when maths can let you down. And then another thing happened near the end of the game. Do you know what? I've been at the top table of a tournament before with double redemptors, and I've rolled 1 for the number of plasma shots twice actually in that game, and it totally sucked. In one of the critical turns here, he rolled 6 for both his plasmas. I mean, that's why I want to remove the randomness on the plasmas. Because I think it would make it much more reliable, I guess. But yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. So maybe the third time I get to the top table, I'll be happy. But so I was kind of hemmed in that I wanted to have a score of Sangry Guard here, a protect this objective, and can heroically intervene here. The problem is he has a psychic power. He can make an opponent 18 inches away fight last, even if he doesn't need line of sight to them. So basically, like the Sangry Guard that ended up being in here. Again, this is maybe kind of a gotcha. I didn't know he had no line of sight, fight last, but he had it. So my Sangry Guard in here that could have heroically intervened in a key turn, they were kind of shut down. So that was very annoying because that would have been like that would have been a big deal, I guess. The other thing that happened, I guess, was because I went first, I was always going to have to basically put a unit into the middle and hope it survived. And when you drop down, basically like the multi-melt is back here, and then he's got the Redemptors, and he had these Vanguard Vets in here, and he's got Woven in here, and I think he had some Blood Claws and another squad of Woven here, which eventually came in here with his Chaplain on the bike. I actually did really well on primaries. I think I probably held like more than him a bunch of times. At the end of my turn, anyway, I was definitely holding more. Obviously, he was killing me back, and I was having to basically sacrifice units to keep his primaries down. And because I couldn't score as many points in my secondaries, I didn't feel like it was. I felt very early on that I was going to really struggle, and so then I just continued to do what I thought I could do, which was really slow down his secondary scoring. And I maybe tried to keep my Sangry Guard alive too heavily here, because at one point he had Woven here in like turn 2 or something, and I just got a Sangry Guard here. I think I had the Wrath of Baal here as well, so I could have easily made a charge onto these Woven. The Sangry Guard would have 100% killed them. The problem is the Woven get to fight on death, so I'm going to lose some Sangry Guard. And I decided not to do that. I brought in my Assault Intercessors and my Chapter Master here to try and kill the Woven, and they completely whiffed it. They failed it. And I think if I'd done that the other way around, I could have then maybe had my Assault Intercessors come in and challenge the backfield or something, and I could have had my Captain, who would have been about maybe my only unit that could have actually survived holding the middle for a turn. So a couple of misplays were played. I did guerrilla tactics my one squad of incursors back here and bring them in over here to do my Nakman data. Obviously had the squad round here. So I basically held these two the entire game, and the battle really happened between these two. I did bring in my Terminators at one point in this backfield. That's the small amount of scoring I got from behind enemy lines, and the Terminators did come in here and they did kill this squad of Blood Claws, and they did flip this to my side for one turn as well. So I feel like I was going to struggle because there's very small amount of cover in the middle. My Eradicators that were, I think they were in the second or third floor in this building with the idea of, getting firing lines through the middle. I put them up to the window in turn 1, and you can see here one of his Redemptors took 5 wounds, and that was from a single Eradicator. Because I lost a couple of Eradicators to return fire. He actually dropped like his Meltas down in turn 1 and then just peppered the window. I think I should have had my Eradicators, and this can be a difficult decision to make. I think I should have had my Eradicators not fight, just hide in the building in turn 1 and just wait till he comes a bit closer, and then make sure that like when the Eradicators do pop out or something, they've got Chapter Master rerolls, and we could have tried to take out one of the Dreadnoughts. The Death Company did trade well. You know, they killed a whole squad of Woven. They very much weakened a squad of Bloodclaws, and that let me hold this objective as well. I also used Mephiston. He was kind of hiding behind here, and he jumped over here and took this objective and then consolidated into cover, which was great. But a squad of Woven with all the exploding sixes and stuff that he had in his list. I even transhumaned Mephiston and he died. I shouldn't have transhumaned him. I should have maybe re-rolled one armor save. I think he could have lived. I think he died with like by 1 wound or something, because obviously he's got that good feel no pain. And again, I tried, and then the other way around, I tried to use a reroll and an armor save on this guy when I had 2 CP left, and he died. And I shouldn't have. I should have just fought on death, and I could have maybe killed a couple of his characters. And so it was like small margins in this game. And also the fact that he went second, I think, was a huge advantage. So you got 10 extra points on Oath, because he always, like, I would mop him up, but it wasn't the end of the battle round in the middle, so I'd get no points, and he'd mop me up and he'd get 2 points, and he'd do that every turn, so you get 10 points just by going second. I think in hindsight, if I played this game again, when I got my Sanguinary Guard in here, if I'd known that he had this ability to stop me fighting, making me fight last in the middle, I'd have probably actually jumped them in here, because he had nothing behind here after like turn 1, and then I could have probably probably the thing that would have made the most sense would have been jump like this, kill the guys behind there and hide in there, and then when it's my turn or his combat phase, heroically intervene out, kill the drop pod, and then mop these guys up. That would have been a much better play, but I mean, this is something that you learn afterwards. And also, I think this one squad of Sanguinary Guard, I was too keen to keep them alive. And I don't know why I was trying to keep them alive, because, I mean, 2 Redemptors with all the plasma cannon shots into the middle are pretty much always going to kill the Sanguinary Guard. It's too much AP in that the plasma cannons are like -3, -4 in the macroplasma. I have to check, but it's a decent minus. It's going to make it very difficult for Sanguinary Guard to save, and every failed save is going to be a dead model. And I'm never going to be able to obscure the Sanguinary Guard behind those 2 little boxes, whereas I could probably obscure my captain behind those 2 little boxes. So I could use my Sanguinary Guard, kill the Woven. Yes, some of them would have died. Maybe some of them could have stayed this side of terrain and sort of limited the return fire from these Dreadnoughts and multi-meltas. They could have then gone that way, and my captain and my assault intercessors, well, my captain could have gone here and maybe held the middle for a minute, used armor and Domitus. These assault intercessors wouldn't have had to come down there. They could have maybe, if these Sanguinary Guard had been bouncing there, the assault intercessors could have joined up here. Then we could have got more points on behind enemy lines. We could have done more points on denying his primary, and it could have just been much better. So a very tough game into a pretty deadly melee list. The multiple ways he had of making me fight last, and also some of his units fighting on death. This made it, I feel like, an uphill battle, potentially before you even include these horrible firing lines this map had as well. And sometimes when you go to a tournament, that's what you got to deal with. So I feel like I did okay, and it was a really good game. And congratulations to Garen again for winning this tournament. I'll be back. I'll be stronger, I'm sure. And it's kind of ironic that I finally dropped the Dreadnoughts, and that's what gets me beaten at the top table of the tournament. Okay, so let's move on to the final section of what I learned from this event. Firstly, when consolidating after killing a unit, considering what the enemy needs their unit to do. Sometimes you'll take losses, sure, but can it mess with their game plan? I.e., they cannot advance if they leave combat. This would have basically shut down the Tyranid's primaries even more so in turn 1. I guess it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I never thought of it this way before. Sometimes I'm just like, should I consolidate in? Should I not consolidate in? You know, In this case, I should have, because it would just have messed with this game plan. Position your whirlwind better. In all seriousness, Blood Angels players need to practice deployments. You basically need to deploy where the enemy can get basically no shots into you. Even in a post-Armor of Contempt world, we're not strong, we don't survive. Practice your deployments. You need to be deploying where you are a threat, but they can see and shoot none of your stuff. Even I fail at this, obviously, but if you do it right, it's super important. Oath of Moment is a much stronger secondary if you go second. Unfortunately, you don't know you're going second before you pick it. They have just changed it now, so the points from holding the middle have been reduced from 2 to 1. It's still stronger if you're going second because it scores at the end of the battle round. I guess anything that scores at the end of the battle round, consider if you're going first or second, because you don't get to choose if you're first or second. So sometimes it can be, well, it's essentially luck of the draw. Oath of Moment, is it as strong as it was before? Maybe not. Will we see it as much? I guess we'll find out. I'm going to do a video coming up on all the secondaries from the new chapter approved in the coming weeks. Next up, Fight on Death units. They're a pretty serious counter to basically Blood Angels or to an all melee list. You're going to take significant losses if you're the aggressor. Try and position your models, remembering the Fight on Death models need to still obey pile-in rules, i.e. move towards the closest enemy models, and they need to be within engagement range or within half an inch of a model that's within engagement range to fight. So my thought behind this was you could actually be pretty smart. You could have a unit that maybe doesn't even charge them, but moves close to them within 1 inch, so that those are the closest models to them. You fight them from the other end of the squad, and then maybe those 3 models that are closest to the other squad, even though they didn't charge them, aren't able to pile into the combat because they need to move closest to the nearest model. Closest to the nearest model doesn't mean closest to the nearest model engagement range, it just means closest to the nearest model. And obviously, they wouldn't be able to fight or enter combat in this case, which could actually limit the amount of losses you take from Fight on Death. I really hadn't played against too many Fight on Death armies. I played against Sisters of Battle Repentia, but I'm so used to just trying to blow them off the table before they get in close combat that normally you don't get to the jump on Repentia, whereas here I was pretty easily able to get the jump on the Woven, in that my guys move 14 and the Woven move 8. I guess with smarter positioning, I could have maybe avoided a bunch of losses, and I'll know that for next turn or next time that we run into the Space Wolves. And then my final thing is, regardless of how your opponents list, don't expect them to play in a particular way. Try and imagine all the ways that they could play if you're well enough versed in their list. Because when I saw the Wolves player, I was convinced he's going to push out from his deployment zone. That's exactly how I would have played a list. But then looking at the table as well, you could see how good his firing arcs were on that final table. So he was able to play much more passive, and it actually really hurt me. And I could have probably scored another 20 points with decent secondaries or different secondaries, and it was only a 16-point game or something like that. So there was a very good chance of me doing much better in this game with better secondary picks, and maybe not trying too hard to be like, right, he's definitely going to play this list this way. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Leave me a comment down below if there's anything that you would like to discuss or any further points that you think you could make that will help myself or other Blood Angels players at their next tournament. I really hope you enjoyed this masterclass series. I'm always looking for suggestions for new content, so if you want to suggest anything, you can also do that in the comments down below, and I do my best to read and answer every single comment. If you wish to support the channel, you can do so over on Patreon or by clicking the big join button under the channel for as little as the price of a cup of coffee every month. It is super appreciated. I will obviously catch you guys in the next video. I'm finally going to be releasing my Battle Ready Sanguinary Guard painting video in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that one. Thanks again for watching, brothers. By the blood are we made strong. Peace.